So this is part 4 of my series on ranking the top 30 heavyweights. There's going to be one final part, part 5, which I'll try and upload very shortly, which is going to be my predictions on how these rankings will change. I'll come back and do them again in 6 months, and we'll see if my predictions are going to come true. I'm going to talk about a few fighters I expect to drop off, take losses, and a few fighters I expect to motor their way up towards the top 10. Anyway, we'll leave that aside for now. Part 4, we're going to focus on the top 6 fighters in the division. And I am pretty confident that my top 5 will not prove to be controversial. You know, there's an argument to say that the top 5 pretty much pick themselves. But my number 6 could be controversial. And it's a ranking that will probably upset a lot of people. But at number 6, I've gone with David Haye. Now, before anyone says, how can you rate David Haye 6? Off the basis of knocking out Wladimir, I'm not basing David Haye at number 6 based on the fact that he knocked out Wladimir. What I'm doing is factoring in the guy's entire career, and I'm factoring in the form he had before he went on his extended leave of absence. And I've tried to be consistent with that theme throughout this list. You know, for example, I've made Eddie Chambers in my top 30, despite the fact that he doesn't have the best recent form. I put Ruslan Chagayev in my, top half, despite the fact he doesn't necessarily have the best recent form. So I've tried to be consistent. And if we look at David Haye, 3 years ago, between 3 and 4 years ago, he was knocking out Derek Chisora. Prior to that, there were wins over Valuev, who, whilst he was an average fighter, Valuev, he was an established heavyweight champion, and wins over John Ruiz as well. So I think David Haye, in the context of his resume as a whole at heavyweight, you know, whilst it's not a fantastic resume, it deserves to put him above the likes of Kubrat Pulev, Charles Martin, Bryant Jennings, you know. And whilst the Wladimir fight didn't prove much in itself, to me it proved that David Haye is still David Haye, and he's still able to perform within heavyweight boxing. So that's why I've brought him back into my top 10. You know, I feel that he deserves to be there based on his career as a whole. You know, these rankings aren't purely based on last fights. You know, if they were based on last fights alone, you couldn't have Bryant Jennings in the top 10. 2 losses. You know, I'm taking a more rounded view of that. Number 5, I've gone for Luis Ortiz. You know, there's an argument to place Luis Ortiz slightly higher, but the reason I've gone for him at number 5 is because there's only one piece of form in his entire resume. Now that piece of form, the stoppage win over Bryant Jennings, is highly, highly impressive. But what's the second best victory on his record? Well, it's the early stoppage of Latif Kayode, and he later tested positive for steroids in that, so I believe that was made a no contest. You know, apart from those 2 fights, there isn't anyone really of any note on his ledger. So, you know, Luis Ortiz, he looks the real deal. He's going in the right direction, but hard to base him more than number 5 due to the fact that the only real substantive form on his resume is Bryant Jennings. Now, number 4, Deontay Wilder. People are going to say, how do you have Luis Ortiz 5 if he's only got one piece of form? And Deontay Wilder's only beaten Bermane Stiverne. So how do you have Deontay Wilder ahead of Luis Ortiz? But the reason I've got Deontay Wilder ahead of Luis Ortiz is, despite the fact that people criticise Wilder's resume, and don't get me wrong, Wilder's resume is very poor for a WBC champion with 3 or 4 defences under his belt. Wilder's opponents have actually been far superior to Luis Ortiz's over the course of his career. You know, a lot of people take the mick out of Wilder because he fought and defeated Audley Harrison. But let me tell you this, Audley Harrison would knock out the vast majority of opponents on Luis Ortiz's record at present. You know, taking Audley aside, Malik Scott, Arthur Spilker, Johan De Par, you know, these are still, they're not the names that I expect to see in world title fights, but they're not bad names. You know, I've got Malik Scott in my number 13 rank. I've got Spilker in my top list, you know, in the top 30. So I feel that Wilder's form, despite the fact that it's not what it could be for a WBC champion, I feel that Wilder's form is strong enough to put him ahead of Luis Ortiz and to make him number 4. Coming in at number 3, I've got Alexander Povetkin. You know, Povetkin has got a very, very good resume. the loss to Wladimir Klitschko was a poor loss. You know, not only in the fact that it was a loss in a world title fight, it was a very, very one-sided beatdown. Despite the fact Wladimir Klitschko may have been unsportsmanlike in that fight, this is boxing. This is a sport that involves trying to render an opponent unconscious. And Wladimir Klitschko dominated that matchup. Taking that aside, Povetkin's got a really, really strong resume. You know, he beat Chigayev, he beat Eddie Chambers, he knocked out Mike Perez in one round, knocked out Carlos Takam, you know. The guy's got a real, real strong record. Was the first guy to stop Marius Wack in only his last fight, and deserves to be very much at the head of affairs at the top of the heavyweight division. At number 2, who else? David Price. No, I'm kidding. Number 2, we have Wladimir Klitschko. You know, people are too quick to write off Wladimir Klitschko. He got outboxed by Tyson Fury, but let's not forget who Wladimir Klitschko is. You know, it was only a year and a half ago that he was knocking Kubrat Pulev unconscious. It's only 2 years or something like that that he dropped Alexander Povetkin 6 times en route to winning every single round of a 12-round fight. You know, even more recently, in the last year or so, beating Bryant Jennings. You know, strong form for Wladimir Klitschko, and you have to have him at number 2 for me. His form is clear of the Wilders, the Ortizes, the Povetkins at this point. And don't write off Wladimir Klitschko. You know, top class fighter, all-time great, all-time top 10 great heavyweight in my opinion. But there can only be one number 1. There can only be number one. Tyson Fury's achievement in beating Wladimir Klitschko was equivalent, in my opinion, to one of Mayweather's later opponents if they had got the win over him. Berto, Pacquiao, Maidana. Wladimir Klitschko, people have very, very short memories in this sport. People forget how dominant Wladimir Klitschko was. 10 years where no one could touch him. I mean, the idea that someone would go out to Germany and outpoint Wladimir Klitschko is simply inconceivable. You know, the fact somebody could have landed a lucky punch at him and knocked him out, but the idea of going to his backyard and outpointing him was, as I say, inconceivable. You know, David Haye struggled to take 2 or 3 rounds off him. Kubrat Pulev didn't take a single round off him. Alexander Povetkin didn't take a single round off him. This guy was, you know, people say he's got old. Yeah, he probably is in the autumn of his career. But he didn't look old to me in the lead-up fights towards that Tyson Fury matchup. And he was as dominant in that heavyweight division as Mayweather was in the welterweights, as far as I'm concerned. And I think Tyson Fury's achievement in beating him that day was strong enough to solidify himself definitely as the number 1 heavyweight fighter in the division. The strongest piece of form in the heavyweight division at present in 2015 or 2016 can only be beating Wladimir Klitschko. And Tyson Fury is the only one of our active heavyweights who's got that accolade on his record. Tyson Fury, the number 1 heavyweight in the division. That concludes the top 30 heavyweights list. It's been the work of several evenings, so I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to do a part 5, which I'll upload shortly, as I say, which contains my predictions. I've also had a number of requests via social media to do further rankings for the welterweight division and the middleweight division. So I'm interested in hearing people's feedback. Leave a comment below. Do you like the rankings videos? Do they entertain you? Or, you know, be honest, if they're boring, say it. I only want to make videos that people want to watch. On the basis that you are interested in ranking videos, let me know which divisions you'd like to see me do next. You know, welterweight, middleweight, those two seem the most popular. You know, I'm not going to lie, I don't have encyclopedic knowledge of the strawweight divisions and the minimum weight divisions, so you're probably not going to see content coming from me on those divisions. But, you know, if people want to watch it, we can do middleweight, welterweight, we can do any of the weights. So let me know your thoughts. Do you like these videos, and which divisions would you like me to cover next? If you've enjoyed this series, please click the video thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that if you could give me a like. Do subscribe to the channel. I wouldn't want you to miss out on any of the future ranking stuff. Many thanks for watching.